It was a day that should have been filled with hope. A day when love, vows, and new beginnings were supposed to take center stage. But just 24 hours after their wedding, the unthinkable happened. 2 lives cut short, one a correctional officer, the other his bride. And the culprits? 2 women with ties to the officer's past. What would drive anyone to go so far as to take the lives of a man and his fiancée just hours after their most sacred moment? Was it revenge? Was it jealousy? Or was it something deeper? Something more shocking, more ruthless than anyone could have ever imagined? This case will leave you with questions, force you to rethink everything about the ties that bind people together, and tear them apart. It's a story of love, betrayal, and the kind of violence that no one ever sees coming. In the calm of a Texas town, this couple's wedding day should have been a celebration of a new chapter, of love, commitment, and hope. But one fateful night, everything changed. A correctional officer, his new bride, and 2 women from his past. What could possibly have connected them all in such a horrific tragedy? The answer lies in the complex history of betrayal, unresolved grudges, and the dangerous intersection of love and resentment. But who was behind the killing and why? It should have been the beginning of a lifetime together. Just hours after a joyful wedding, a couple's love story came to a violent and tragic end. A Texas correctional officer and his fiancée, both filled with dreams for the future, found their lives extinguished in a senseless act of violence. Their bodies were discovered in their home, a place that should have been a sanctuary. The killers, it would seem, were those who once shared their lives with the officer, the mothers of his children. 2 women with a dangerous past, one that was inextricably linked to the officer's career and personal life. In 2024, a man who had spent years behind bars, overseeing some of the most hardened criminals, found himself facing a deadly fate at the hands of those he once trusted. His life was filled with tough decisions, and yet nothing could have prepared him for the horror that unfolded in the place he should have felt safest, his own home. But who were these 2 people? The correctional officer was more than just a man in uniform. He was a father, a partner, someone who had worked his entire life in one of the most dangerous professions imaginable. His job inside the prison system was a reminder that there were those out there willing to break any rule. But in the end, he too was a part of a system that could unravel when least expected. This officer's life had always been defined by order, structure, and control. But for all his training and discipline, nothing could prepare him for the storm that loomed on the horizon. Then there was his fiancée, a woman who was described as full of life and full of love. In a world that often seemed unforgiving, she brought joy into the officer's life. Someone he had turned to when the weight of his job became too heavy to carry alone. Their relationship wasn't just one of commitment. It was one of deep, genuine affection. Just the day before, they had pledged themselves to each other. Their wedding, a celebration of what many thought would be a lasting union. Yet, for all the beauty of that day, it would soon become the tragic memory they would never get to share. But the most chilling part of the story is what lay behind the scenes. 2 women, once part of the officer's life, now tangled in a web of crime, bitterness, and unresolved emotions. The 2 mothers of his children, with criminal background of their own, had long lived with the ghosts of the past. And somehow, their paths were always destined to cross again with the officers, leading to a night no one could have ever foreseen. They had their own agendas, and their history with the officer was far from peaceful. These women, both felons in their own right, had shared moments with the officer, intimate moments that would forever tie them to him. Their actions in the months before this horrific event seemed to indicate unresolved grudges, simmering resentment, and perhaps a hunger for control. The officer's involvement with them and his inability to fully break free from past had set the stage for something far more tragic than anyone could have predicted. As the investigation into this crime begins to take shape, a picture emerges of a man stuck between his responsibilities as a father and his position as a lawman. A man caught in the midst of his past. And those who once claimed to care for him had come back to claim more than just his attention. The stage was set. But what drove these women to murder? What triggered such violent action? And how is this tragedy going to shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and revenge? The investigation, still in its early stages, promises to reveal a series of unsettling truths. But this is only the beginning of a twisted tale. one that no one could foreseen, and one that will haunt those involved for years to come. It was a day that should have marked the beginning of forever. The couple, elated, standing side by side, ready to face the world together. A wedding, a promise made, and a bright future ahead. For the officer, his fiancée, it was a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and new beginnings. They had pledged their vows, exchanged rings, and sealed their future with a kiss, a moment captured in photos that would have lasted a lifetime. The wedding was a celebration of all that was right in their world, until, in the blink of an eye, it was shattered. Hours later, the officer and his fiancée were found dead in their home, their lives extinguished so quickly, so violently, it was as if the world had turned upside down. The joy they had shared just a day before was now replaced with an unbearable grief. The people closest to them, the ones who were supposed to care the most, were now at the center of a horrifying crime. What happened in the hours between their wedding day and the discovery of their bodies? What turned a day of happiness into an unspeakable nightmare? The investigation into their deaths quickly turned its focus on the officer's past relationships, the two women who had once shared his life. These weren't just any women, but individuals whose pasts were marred by criminal records, violent histories, and ties to a system that held no mercy. The officer had tried to move on from these relationships, to build a future with his fiancée, but the shadow of the past always lingered. These women, with their own dark histories, weren't ready to let go of their hold on him, his children, his past. They were all tied to a time that seemed to never fade, no matter how hard he tried to start anew. It's easy to think that the anger that might have driven these women was born of jealousy. Perhaps resentment had been festering for years. Maybe it wasn't just the officer's departure from their lives that hurt them, but his new life, a new woman, a new beginning. How far would they go to keep him from escaping them, from starting over? Could that desire for control have transformed into something far darker, more violent than anyone imagined? What kind of emotional turmoil twists a person's mind until they reach the point where they would kill someone they once loved, or someone they thought they owned? The weight of betrayal, of unhealed wounds, of jealousy. It can tear a person's soul until there's nothing left but anger. And sometimes that anger can make a person do the unthinkable. As the investigation took shape, law enforcement quickly realized there was more to this crime than what first appeared. Evidence, subtle yet telling, started to surface. Suspicion mounted that the officer's ex-partners were deeply involved, but what kind of involvement? Did they pull the trigger, or did someone else play a part in this chilling act of violence? Was this a carefully orchestrated plan? Something cold and calculated? Or was it a violent outburst, born of anger and desperation? A crime of passion that spiraled beyond control? The officer's history with these women gave motive, but the question remained, how far were they willing to go to reclaim what they thought was theirs? With each new discovery, the case seemed to grow more complicated. But then, just as the investigation seemed to be settling into a clear narrative, something unexpected happened. A shocking twist. Evidence that no one saw coming. Could the officer's career, his work with dangerous criminals, his very life as a correctional officer, have played a part in his murder? Was there more to this than a tangled love triangle? Was there someone, or something, lurking behind the curtain, pulling strings no one could see? Was the officer's past catching up with him in ways no one anticipated? Did the murder come from the hands of the women who once shared his life? Or was there someone else in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? And what did the officer's role in the correctional system really have to do with this tragedy? As new details emerge in the investigation, it becomes clear that this is a case filled with more than just heartbreak. It's a case that will challenge everything you think you know about loyalty, love, and revenge. The truth is buried deep, and only time will reveal the full story. 4. Engagement-boosting moments. So what really happened that night? What could have driven these two women to take the lives of the officer and his fiancée just hours after their wedding? Was it pure revenge, a desperate attempt to cling to something they'd lost long ago? Or was there something deeper at play? Something we've yet to uncover? Maybe the truth is far more complex than any of us can imagine. We've seen the pieces of this tragic puzzle, each one more disturbing than the last. But there's still so much we don't know. Could jealousy have been the spark that lit the fire? Or were the motives hidden in the shadows, disguised as something else? Maybe it's not as simple as we think. Perhaps there's an even darker force behind these deaths. We want to hear from you. What do you think led to this senseless act of violence? Could the officer's ex-partners really be capable of such a brutal crime? Or do you believe there's something more we're missing? A twist no one saw coming? Leave your theories in the comments below. We'll be reading them all. We've posed a question, but now it's time for you to weigh in. Who do you think is truly responsible for this crime? Is it the baby mamas, driven by years of rage and unresolved emotions? Or is there someone else we haven't accounted for? Someone hiding in the background, pulling the strings? If you've been captivated by this story, by the twists and turns we've uncovered, make sure you hit that like button to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime content, where we'll bring you deeper into the world of mysteries that keep you up at night. And share this video with your friends, especially those who love a good mystery, because this one's far from over. Stay tuned, because the next chapter in the story is about to unfold, and trust us, there's more to this case than meets the eye. 5. Pacing and transitions throughout the script. It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. A wedding, a promise, a future. But what started as a day of celebration soon turned into something no one could have imagined. Hours after they said their vows, the officer and his fiancée were found dead in their own home, their lives taken in the blink of an eye. But the story doesn't end there. No, the investigation into their deaths has only just begun, and the deeper you dig, the darker the story becomes. The focus immediately turned to the officer's past, his relationships, his children, the ex-partners who were still in his life in ways that seemed far from over. These weren't just any women. They were felons. Women whose criminal histories were intertwined with the officers, dragging their past into the light in ways they would never expect. But as the investigation continued, one question stood out above all others. What had driven these women to murder? And just when you think the motive is clear, that's when things take a darker turn. Evidence points toward the officers' ex-partners. But could they have acted alone? Or was there something or someone else behind the crime, pulling the strings from behind the scenes? It's clear that the officer's past didn't just haunt him. It haunted everyone around him. But with every piece of evidence that surfaces, the story only becomes more complicated. Could jealousy have been the trigger? Or was there something more at play, something buried deep beneath years of unresolved conflict? As the investigators pieced the timeline together, shocking revelations started to emerge. And just when it seemed like the investigation was on the verge of a breakthrough, a twist, one that no one could have seen coming, changed everything. Could the officer's career in the prison system have played a role in his death? What if the dangerous criminals he dealt with every day were involved in this tragedy, somehow connected to the murder of a man sworn to protect society? With each clue, the case seems to grow even more tangled. Is it really about revenge? Or is it something far more complex? Something buried under layers of emotional turmoil and dangerous associations? The investigation is far from over. And as more evidence comes to light, it seems the truth is slipping further out of reach. But one thing is certain. The deeper we go, the more unsettling the details become. Who really killed the officer and his fiancée? And why? The answers are waiting to be uncovered, but they may be darker than anyone could have imagined. A young couple, full of dreams and hope for their future. Their love, still fresh, untouched by the challenges of time. They had just made a promise to each other, to stand together, no matter what life would throw their way. Their wedding should have been the beginning of a beautiful journey, a story of shared moments, laughter, and growth. But that story was brutally cut short. The bright future they had just begun to build was extinguished, leaving only heartbreak and unanswered questions in its wake. For the families, the friends, and the community, this wasn't just a murder. It was a tragedy, one that shattered the lives of everyone who knew them. A love story, once so pure, was turned into a nightmare. The officer's mother, devastated, gave an aching statement. "I'll never see my son again. He didn't deserve this." Her grief echoed across the community, a mother's pain that no words could heal. This wasn't just a senseless killing. It was the end of a future she had imagined, a future now torn away in an instant. And his fiancé's family? They too were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Their daughter had found someone she believed she would spend the rest of her life with, a promise she made on her wedding day. And now, they were left to mourn her and him, both lost so violently. This story isn't just about the investigation or the search for answers. It's about the lives that were destroyed, the people left behind, struggling to make sense of a loss that feels impossible to understand. The officer and his fiancée didn't deserve to have their story end this way. They were just starting out with so much life ahead of them, and now their future will never be realized. But as we try to understand why this happened, we're left with a chilling question. What drives someone to kill someone they once loved? What kind of anger, what kind of hurt can transform love into a violent end? Could it be that the officer's actions as a correctional officer had something to do with it? His life in the prison system, dealing with dangerous, volatile people every day, was never far removed from his home life. Could his work have fueled bitterness in the women who once shared his life? Could the resentment, the jealousy, and the betrayal they felt have built to a point where they were consumed by emotions beyond control? Jealousy, betrayal, revenge. These are powerful emotions. Could they have overwhelmed them, clouding their judgment until they saw no way out but violence? Is it possible that the pain of losing him, of watching him move on with someone else, consumed their hearts, turning them into something unrecognizable? What makes a person go this far? What could they have been feeling in those final moments as they made the choice to end two lives? Were they just acting out of rage? Or was there a calculated plan behind it all? No matter the motivation, the result was the same: two lives taken and a future erased in a single devastating act. In the end, it's not just the investigation that matters. It's the people left behind, the loved ones whose lives will never be the same. The victims of this horrific crime were real people, with hopes, dreams, and families who are now forced to live without them. This case is a reminder that behind every tragedy, there are real human beings, each with their own story, their own heartache, and their own need for justice. In the end, this is the story of a Texas correctional officer, a fiancée who had just begun her life with him, and two women from his past, women whose connections to him were complicated and filled with unresolved feelings. What should have been the start of a beautiful chapter instead became a horrifying chapter in a tragedy no one saw coming. The couple's wedding, full of joy and hope for a future together, was meant to be a celebration, a promise of forever. But in an instant, that promise was shattered, leaving only death in its wake. Was it the officer's job, the dangerous world of the correctional system, and the people it brought into his life, that led to this horrific outcome? Could his relationships with the two women he once loved have sparked a rage so deep it consumed everything else? Or was there something even more hidden, something deeper and more personal, that caused this violent and senseless act? The answers aren't clear yet. And as investigators continue to piece together the details of that fateful night, the questions linger. Was this a crime driven by jealousy and resentment? Or is there something else we haven't uncovered yet? Something that could change everything we know about this tragedy? This case is far from finished. We're only scratching the surface of the truth behind these brutal deaths. If you want more insights and updates on this investigation, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the like button and comment below to let us know what you think happened. Do you have your own theory? We'd love to hear it. But don't go anywhere just yet. In our next episode, we'll go deeper into the investigation. New evidence has emerged, evidence that could completely change the direction of this case. What did the police find that could turn everything on its head? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. And the truth, well, that's still waiting to be revealed.